19th September 1943. It was early morning when the mist hadn't yet lifted from the jungle floor. The air was thick, filled with moisture and the scent of mud and gunpowder. Deep inside the island of Bougainville, 120 American commandos sat silently in position, each one of them fully aware of the risk they were about to take. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an ambush gone wrong. No, this was a plan, a trap, and every man there had agreed to it. Captain Elijah Ward, a calm but sharp man in his late 30s, stood crouched behind a thick bush, scanning the path ahead. He knew that around 1,000 Japanese soldiers were less than an hour away, and he had no intention of running. He had already walked into enemy territory with his small unit of rangers, fully prepared to be surrounded. "Hold your fire," he whispered into his radio. "Let them come closer." The plan was built on one dangerous idea: let the enemy think they had the upper hand. The Japanese troops, confident in their numbers, had been tracking the Rangers for 2 days. Ward's men had left fake tracks, used broken radio signals, and staged fake camps to give the impression that they were tired and low on supplies. It was all an act, a performance meant to pull the enemy deeper into the jungle, into a natural choke point. Around them, the jungle formed a narrow pass with sharp hills on both sides and a muddy stream in the middle. The commandos had planted explosives under rocks, tied tripwire to trees, and hidden snipers at higher ground. The enemy wouldn't see it coming, not until it was too late. By 10:30 a.m., the Japanese troops had entered the pass. At first it was just a few scouts, then entire platoons. They marched with discipline, rifles ready, unaware that they were walking straight into death. Ward waited until the last group was deep inside the trap. His finger hovered over the remote detonator. "Now," he said. A thunderous explosion shattered the silence. Fire and smoke rose from the hills as rocks fell and trees splintered. Screams echoed through the jungle as chaos took over the enemy ranks. The first blast had wiped out the front line, cutting off retreat. Behind them, the Rangers opened fire with machine guns and grenades, targeting officers and heavy gunners first. The Japanese soldiers tried to organize, but the narrow path worked against them. They were trapped like animals in a cage, unable to move freely or escape. The Americans used hit-and-run tactics, popping out from hidden foxholes, taking shots, and disappearing before the enemy could react. Snipers picked off those who tried to climb the slopes. Ward moved like a ghost among his men, giving orders, dragging the wounded, and firing when needed. Sweat poured down his face, but his focus never broke. He had trained his team for months for this moment. They weren't just fighting. They were controlling the battlefield, like puppeteers pulling strings. Within 15 minutes, nearly 300 Japanese soldiers had fallen. Another 200 tried to flee through the muddy stream, only to be cut down by hidden gunners and mines placed earlier in the night. Blood mixed with water as the jungle turned into a graveyard. By the 30-minute mark, the shooting had almost stopped. A few desperate cries could be heard in the distance, but the battle was over. The rest of the Japanese force had either retreated or lay dead among the trees. Ward stood silently, watching smoke rise from the battlefield. His face showed no pride, only exhaustion. One of his sergeants, Ramirez, walked up and said, "We really did it, sir." Ward nodded slowly. "We did, but they'll be back." And they would be, but not without fear. From that day on, the enemy would remember that number. 120 men. Just 120 American commandos who had chosen to be surrounded, only to wipe out half of a much larger force in half an hour. No more, no less, the jungle was still. Smoke drifted low over the battlefield like a ghost refusing to leave. Dead leaves, broken rifles, and bloodied bodies carpeted the muddy trail where the trap had been sprung. The silence after the storm was thick. No birds, no crickets, just the sound of boots stepping carefully over shattered branches and lost helmets. Captain Ward moved cautiously, checking each of his men. Some had light wounds, a few had been grazed by bullets or shrapnel, but not one of them had been lost. That was the miracle in all this. He had led his team into the jaws of death and pulled them out alive. He crouched beside a young soldier named Phelps, who was breathing hard, wiping blood from a cut on his cheek. You all right, kid? Phelps nodded. Yes, sir, just didn't think it would really work. Ward gave him a small smile, tired but steady. Neither did they. They spent the next hour gathering supplies from the fallen enemy, ammunition, maps, water canisters. The Japanese hadn't expected to die today, and they'd come prepared to occupy, not retreat. That mistake had cost them dearly. Among the gear, Sergeant Ramirez found a worn leather folder tucked into an officer's coat. Inside it, a hand-drawn map marked with red lines and notes in Japanese. Ward studied it for a long moment. His brow furrowed. They weren't just chasing us, he muttered. They were heading somewhere. Ramirez leaned closer. You think it's about the airfield intel? Could be. These positions. They're spread in a curve around this ridge here. He pointed at a spot just 10 clicks north. If they reach this spot, they'll cut off the supply line to the 3rd Marine Division. That's why they move so fast. Ramirez's eyes narrowed. So we just killed the scouting wave, Ward nodded. And there's likely more coming. He turned to his men, who were resting under the trees, wiping sweat from their faces and wrapping bandages where needed. All right, listen up, he shouted. Every head turned toward him. We've done our part here, but the job's not finished. According to this, he held up the map, this was just the beginning. The Japanese are pushing for a position that'll screw the Marines' supply line. If we sit here and wait, they'll outflank our entire forward position by tomorrow morning. One of the Rangers, a wiry soldier named Knox, frowned. Are we moving, sir? We're low on ammo and we ain't slept in 2 days. Ward's voice was calm but sharp. You want to rest? You'll get your rest in a body bag if we don't get moving. We need to intercept them before they regroup. The mood turned heavy again. They all knew what he meant. Another engagement, another risk. But they trusted him. After what had just happened, Ward had earned that loyalty with blood and strategy. By dusk, the team was already on the move, cutting through the jungle like shadows. The rain started to fall lightly, soaking their gear and muting their footsteps. They moved in silence, stopping only to check bearings and scout ahead. The map showed an old communications outpost the Japanese might use to regroup. That's where they were headed. As night fell, they came across the first signs, boot prints, broken branches, and quiet whispers in the distance. Ward raised his fist, signaling a halt. He pulled out his binoculars and peered through the darkness. Dim lights flickered in the distance. Lanterns. Camp, he said under his breath. They crept forward inch by inch. It was a small clearing surrounded by trees. A group of around 50 Japanese soldiers had stopped there, likely the survivors or a second wave waiting for orders. They were setting up temporary tents and boiling water. Ward crouched low behind a tree and whispered, "We hit them before they move out." No explosives this time. Silent takedown. Get in. Take the officers out first, cause panic. Then vanish. Ramirez grinned. Back to ghost work, huh? Ward nodded. Always. One by one, the Rangers slipped through the trees like shadows. Knives drawn, guns loaded, hearts pounding. The first takedown was swift. A sentry dragged silently into the bushes. The second was even faster. Within minutes, chaos broke out. Someone fired a warning shot, then another. Screams rang out, followed by shouts in Japanese. The Rangers didn't stay in one place. They kept moving, picking off the soldiers from different angles, making them believe they were surrounded again. Within 10 minutes, the enemy was either dead or scattered, running into the night, afraid of ghosts that never stayed still. Ward stood in the center of the broken camp, breathing hard, sweat mixing with rain. "We're not just fighting soldiers," he said quietly. "We're breaking their spirit." And the war, he knew, was won in the mind long before it was ever won on the field. The rain had stopped by morning, but the forest was still dripping wet. Every leaf seemed to whisper, every step left a muddy print. The jungle was alive with tension again, as if it knew something bigger was coming. Captain Ward stood on the ridge above the broken enemy camp, watching the sun rise through the mist. The men were quiet, sitting in a half-circle below him, eating dry rations and cleaning their weapons. No one smiled anymore. The thrill of victory had worn off, and now only the weight of what was next remained. Ward held the Japanese map in one hand, now smudged and folded from the rain. He had circled a location marked with a red star, something that hadn't made sense before. But now, after taking down the second group of enemy troops in the night, he understood. The Japanese weren't just chasing the Rangers or pushing toward the marine supply lines. They were after something hidden, a cave or a bunker, maybe a storage site. Something important enough to risk 1,000 men for. He looked back at his team. "Next objective is 2 clicks east," he said flatly. "There's something they're protecting, and we're going to take it." Ramirez raised an eyebrow. "You sure about this?" "We've already pushed past the point of no return." Ward gave a single nod. "That's exactly why we can't turn around now." They moved through the jungle again, cutting through vines and ducking under fallen branches. The deeper they went, the more unnatural the air began to feel. The trees were older here, the paths less traveled, as if the land itself had kept this place hidden from the war. By midday, they reached the edge of a steep ravine, with thick rocks rising on both sides like natural walls. A narrow path led down into the center, where the entrance to a cave was barely visible beneath layers of moss and stone. Knox squinted. "That looks like an old mining tunnel or something." Ward crouched, touching the dirt. "Tracks, fresh ones." "It's occupied," they observed from the high ground. Japanese soldiers were stationed at the cave mouth, maybe 30 or 40, heavily armed, digging and hauling crates into the darkness. This wasn't a simple supply point. It was a hidden base, and they were protecting something they didn't want found. "Any idea what's inside?" Ramirez asked. Ward shook his head. "Could be anything. Ammo dump, intel, radio equipment. Hell, maybe even gold. Doesn't matter. Command needs to know what's here. We go in, clean it up, get proof, and radio back." They set up positions quietly, like wolves closing in on prey. No shouting, no rushing in. Every movement was calculated. Ward's men had become more than soldiers. They were hunters now, ghosts in the green. At exactly 1400 hours, Ward gave the signal. 3 silenced shots cracked the air. 3 guards dropped. The rest of the team moved fast, launching smoke grenades to blind the defenders. Chaos erupted, but there was no panic on the Rangers' side. They swept through the camp like a wave, rifles barking, blades flashing, each step bringing them closer to the cave entrance. The fight didn't last long. In under 8 minutes, it was over. The last Japanese soldier tried to run and was dropped with a single shot by Knox. Silence fell again, but this time it was heavier. Ward approached the cave, flashlight in hand. The entrance was wide enough for 2 men to walk side by side, but the air inside was damp and stale. He motioned for 2 men to follow, Ramirez and Phelps. Inside, the darkness wrapped around them like a second skin. The cave walls were rough, and the deeper they went, the colder it became. About 20 meters in, they found the first set of crates. Marked in Japanese, sealed tight. Ward pried one open with the edge of his knife. What he saw made him freeze. Inside were stacks of coded documents, maps, photographs, but not just military plans. These were blueprints of other Allied positions, supply routes, ship coordinates, and tucked beneath them, pages written in English, lists of American names, soldiers, commanders. Ramirez read over Ward's shoulder, his voice low. "They weren't just fighting us. They were tracking us." Phelps stepped back, uneasy. "Sir, this is intel stolen from inside our own camps." Ward stood up slowly, realization hitting him like a slap. "We've got a leak. Someone's been feeding them information, high level, and they buried it here." He looked back toward the cave entrance, where his men were still watching the tree line. "Get it packed. We're heading back to base," he said, voice sharp. "And when we do, we're going to find out who's been helping the enemy from the inside. What had started as a mission to survive had now become something darker, a hunt for betrayal. And the truth, Ward knew, was going to be even more dangerous than the jungle they'd just conquered. The sun was already setting when they emerged from the cave, their arms full of stolen intelligence, crates of documents, coded pages, maps, and names they weren't supposed to see. The orange glow of evening lit up the blood-stained jungle around them, and for a brief moment, Captain Ward stood still, staring into the dying light, like a man who'd just looked behind the curtain of the war and didn't like what he found. Every step back through the jungle now felt heavier, not because of the weight of the crates, but the weight of the truth. There had been rumors before, whispers among the soldiers, supply drops going missing, ambushes too perfectly timed, enemy attacks that came minutes after Allied positions changed. But now it was more than suspicion. Someone inside their own ranks was feeding information to the Japanese. Someone high enough to know the names of officers and the details of secret missions. Ramirez walked beside Ward, wiping dirt from his face. "What do you think Command will do when they see what we found?" Ward didn't answer immediately. He stared straight ahead, voice low. "Depends on who it exposes." That silence said more than anything. In war, truth wasn't always welcome, especially if it embarrassed the wrong people. Behind them, Knox and Phelps were carrying the last crate, both glancing around nervously. The jungle was too quiet again, like it was holding its breath, the way it had done right before every attack. "Eyes up," Ward warned. "We've made too much noise. If there's anyone left out here, they'll be hunting us by now." And he was right. Just 30 minutes into their march, they heard the sound, distant at first, like boots crunching wet leaves, then sharper, closer, crackling branches, whispered commands in Japanese. Ward raised a hand. The unit dropped low, weapons ready. The sound of movement came from the east, fast, too fast for a patrol. This was a search unit. Maybe survivors from the earlier fight, maybe reinforcements responding to the gunfire at the cave. "Set up a perimeter," Ward ordered. "Do not let them take these crates." The Rangers fanned out behind fallen trees and large rocks, creating a defensive ring around the intel. They had no time to dig in, no time to set traps. It would be a straight-up firefight, and they were outnumbered again. The first shot came just before darkness fell. A bullet zipped past Knox's ear, slamming into a tree. Then came the shouting, a wave of enemy soldiers breaking through the trees, yelling, guns blazing. Muzzle flashes lit up the darkening jungle like lightning. Ward returned fire, short burst, eyes scanning, calculating. He could see them, 50, maybe more. They were trying to overwhelm the perimeter, push through, and seize the crates. "Don't let them flank!" he shouted, already moving to the left side where Ramirez was taking cover behind a log. "We're pinned here," Ramirez called back. "They've got machine guns on the ridge." Phelps was already bleeding from a cut above his eyebrow, but he held his position, firing carefully, not wasting a single round. "They want the intel, sir. They're aiming for the crates." Ward's heart pounded. He had to make a call. Hold the ground and risk losing everything, or scatter and protect the mission. He grabbed his radio, split into fire teams. Alpha protects the crates. Bravo pulls back and leads them away. "Sir?" Knox asked, wide-eyed. "Do it!" Ward barked. "This isn't about glory. It's about stopping a traitor. We can't let that intel fall into enemy hands." Within seconds, the team split. 5 Rangers stayed behind, hunkered down, dragging the crates deeper into cover. The other 5, led by Ward himself, made noise, firing and retreating, making it look like the whole squad was pulling back. The Japanese took the bait. They chased after Ward's team, guns roaring, thinking they had the Americans on the run. The forest lit up again, bullets cutting through trees, dirt spraying everywhere. Ward ran low, leading his men through a shallow ravine, weaving between trees, until they hit a narrow stream bed. There they turned, dropped to one knee, and opened fire. The chasing soldiers didn't expect the ambush and fell quickly, their screams swallowed by the jungle. When the gunfire died down, Ward checked his men. They were bruised, scraped, bleeding, but alive. He picked up his radio. "Alpha, status?" A crackle, then Ramirez's voice. "Crates secured, no losses. We're ready to move when you are." Ward exhaled slowly. They'd done it again, outnumbered, surrounded, and still standing. But he knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Somewhere behind enemy lines, or worse, inside their own, there was a traitor feeding the Japanese every move they made. And now, with proof in their hands, the real war was just beginning. The jungle was pitch black now, the kind of black that made even the closest branches vanish into nothing. Captain Ward's boots squelched in the wet mud as he pushed forward, his rifle tight to his chest, eyes scanning for movement, ears tuned to every rustle. Behind him, Ramirez, Phelps, and the others followed in silence, their breaths low and careful. Every man was running on instinct now, adrenaline, fear, and the stubborn refusal to die out here. They reunited with Alpha Team 2 hours later in a gully hidden by thick underbrush. The crates were stacked in the center, covered with a camouflage tarp. No one spoke when Ward arrived. They were too tired, too shaken, and too aware that what they carried now was bigger than any battle they'd fought. Ramirez handed him a flask of water. "We've got a new problem." Ward took a sip, his throat burning from the dust and smoke. "Let me guess, no contact with command?" "Nothing. Radio's been dead since the cave." That hit hard. For the past year, Ward had led missions in hellish terrain, in impossible situations. But always, no matter how bad it got, he could call for help. Now they were ghosts with stolen secrets, surrounded by enemies, and possibly betrayed from within. Knox came over, holding one of the documents from the crate. He pointed at a set of handwritten notes. "Look at this. These aren't just code lists. These are orders, typed in English but signed with a Japanese insignia." Ward looked closer. The paper was aged, stained from the cave humidity, but readable. It mentioned Operation Pale Sky, something he'd never heard of. And worse, it included a phrase that made his blood run cold. Allied Insider confirmation required before execution. Priority Major K. Wallace. He stared at it for a long time. Major Kenneth Wallace. That was the name of the commanding officer back at HQ. The same man who had approved their mission. The same man who had sent them on what now looked like a suicide run. Phelps read it over Ward's shoulder. "He gave us the mission. And he's the one leaking information?" Ward didn't answer right away. He folded the paper and tucked it into his vest. "We don't know anything for sure yet. But if Wallace is involved, this whole damn command structure might be compromised." Silence fell again. Thick, heavy, dangerous. Ramirez finally broke it. "What do we do?" Ward looked at the men one by one. Dirt-streaked, blooded, but loyal to the end. They hadn't signed up to play spy games or chase down traitors. They were soldiers, built for war, not politics. But now, the war had followed them into the shadows. "We move by night. No trails, no smoke, no open comms. We'll head south to the emergency outpost at Hill Point Ridge. If we can get to the long-range transmitter there, we'll contact Division Command directly, bypass Wallace." "And if Wallace intercepts it?" Knox asked. "Then we make sure what we found gets out first," Ward said. "I don't care if it's the damn president on the other end. Someone's going to see the truth." They moved at midnight. Each man took turns carrying the crates, rotating every mile. The jungle was cruel. Vines grabbed at their legs, insects bit through their uniforms, and the mud slowed them down at every step. But they kept going. The weight of the mission had fused them together now. Every mile they covered was a step closer to revealing what the war was really hiding. By dawn, they reached a rocky bluff that overlooked the valley below and saw smoke. Not from fires, from destruction. Hill Point Ridge was burning. Flames curled up from what was supposed to be a secure Allied post. Tents were shredded, the radio tower was leaning, and blackened bodies lay scattered near sandbags. "No," Phelps whispered. "They got here first." Ward dropped to his knee, raising his binoculars. Through the lenses he saw movement, Japanese uniforms, but also American ones mixed in. A small group of men in Allied fatigues, standing casually beside the enemy, weapons slung over their shoulders, not in defense, but in alliance. Ramirez muttered, "Traitors. Actual goddamn traitors." Ward's face went cold. "They knew we'd come here." For the first time, fear crept into his voice. Not fear of death, but fear of what this war had become. It wasn't just bullets and bombs anymore. It was corruption, lies, sabotage. People they trusted selling out their own men for power, for money, for reasons he couldn't yet understand. Ward lowered the binoculars. "We can't go down there." "So what now?" Knox asked. "We disappear," Ward said, standing. "We vanish into this jungle. And we don't stop until we get this evidence to someone who still believes in what we're fighting for." Phelps looked shaken. "And if there's no one left like that?" Ward tightened the strap on his rifle. "Then we burn every last one of them down ourselves. The jungle swallowed them again." Captain Ward led the way, machete in hand, slicing through thick foliage as the team moved deeper into the interior. Behind him, the men said nothing. No one complained. No one asked for rest. They didn't need orders now. They understood the mission had changed. This wasn't about holding a position or completing a patrol. It wasn't even about surviving anymore. It was about exposing the rot. They were carrying proof that men in their own army, men in crisp uniforms with clean hands, had fed American lives to the enemy like meat to wolves. And now, with Hill Point Ridge burned and their closest contact point destroyed, they were ghosts with secrets the enemy would kill to bury. Ward stopped at a riverbank, wiping sweat from his brow. He motioned for the others to kneel. "We'll follow this stream south," he said quietly. "It leads toward the coastline. There's a civilian supply point near Taba Bay, old logging station. No military presence, just locals and maybe a few Allied contractors." Phelps, kneeling nearby, furrowed his brow. "You think we can trust civilians now?" Ward looked back at him. "I don't know who we can trust, but I do know this jungle's trying to kill us, and Wallace's men are worse." They moved again, sticking close to the water, rifles raised, ears tuned to every sound. The river offered a narrow path, and it also covered their scent, an old jungle trick Ward had learned fighting in the Philippines. If Wallace had men tracking them, it would slow them down. As the hours passed, the jungle changed. The air grew cooler. The thick trees gave way to a more open terrain. Birds called again. Sunlight actually touched the ground in spots, but the tension didn't leave. Then Ramirez spotted it. "Sir, up there, look," a glint of metal between the trees. Ward raised his binoculars. At first, he didn't believe it. A single-engine bush plane, parked in a clearing hidden under a camouflage net. Faded Allied markings on the tail. Abandoned, maybe, or maybe not. They crept closer. As they neared, Ward raised a clenched fist, signaling a halt. The clearing was too perfect. The net too recently placed. Someone had been here, or still was. He motioned for Knox and Ramirez to circle around while he approached from the front, slow and low. The engine was cool to the touch, which meant it hadn't flown in at least a day. But there were fresh footprints in the mud. A set of 2, maybe 3 people. Then a voice rang out low and firm. American accent. "Stop right there!" Ward turned slowly, raising his hands. From behind the plane stepped a man in civilian clothes, tan and dusty, holding a sidearm. "Who are you?" the man asked. "Military." Ward didn't answer immediately. He was studying the man, rough beard, sunburned skin, hollow eyes. Not a soldier. A contractor, maybe, or ex-something, but not enemy. Captain Elijah Ward, 5th Ranger Division. "Who are you?" The man hesitated, then lowered the gun. "Name's Carter. Used to fly supply runs for the Australians. Got stranded out here when Command shut down the back channels. Been hiding since." Ward stepped forward. "You got a working radio?" Carter nodded slowly. "Yeah, why?" Ward reached into his vest and pulled out the folded document with Major Wallace's name on it. "Because I've got proof there's a traitor feeding intel to the Japanese. High Command, we need to get this to someone who's not in Wallace's pocket." Carter's face changed, not surprised, not skeptical, just tired. "You're not the first to say that," he muttered. "But you might be the first to have evidence." Inside the bush plane, Carter had a shortwave radio, old, scratched, but operational. He powered it up while Ward's team spread out to form a perimeter. "Signal's been spotty," Carter warned, "but I know a guy on an offshore relay. Goes by Tracker, doesn't work for Command anymore. But he listens." Ward nodded. "Get him!" The radio crackled. Carter worked the dial, muttering into the mic. For 10 tense minutes, nothing but static. Then turn to Tracker here. "Go ahead." Ward grabbed the mic. "This is Captain Ward. We have physical evidence of Allied intelligence leaking to enemy forces. We're in hostile territory with minimal support. We need extraction and secure contact with someone outside Wallace's command." There was a long silence. Then Tracker's voice, calm but cold. "Copy that, Captain. I've been waiting for this call. Stay put. Extraction ETA, 90 minutes. And Ward, don't trust anyone who gets here too fast." The signal died. Ward lowered the mic. "They know we're still alive," he said. "And now they'll come. But this time, they'll come pretending to be friends." He looked out at the jungle. "Let them come." This time he was ready. The jungle held its breath. Every leaf seemed still. Every sound, that even the birds, had vanished. Captain Ward stood by the wing of the bush plane, his eyes fixed on the trees beyond. Somewhere out there, death was coming, dressed like help. They all knew it. The team moved into defensive positions around the clearing. Phelps set up on the ridgeline with binoculars, scanning every tree trunk for shadows. Knox laid a claymore mine by the southern path. Ramirez crouched beside a fallen log, feeding rounds into a belt-fed machine gun they'd salvaged from the Japanese cache. The crates with the intelligence were stacked beneath the plane's wing, covered in netting and guarded like gold. Ward glanced at his watch. 74 minutes left. "Carter," he called quietly. The pilot stepped out of the cockpit, sweat on his forehead, hand still gripping his sidearm like it was part of his arm. "You sure Tracker's extraction is clean?" Carter gave a slow nod. "Tracker was burned by Wallace himself. Used to run Black Ops radio relays. They shut him down when he started asking too many questions. He's not on anyone's payroll now." Ward looked back at the jungle. "That's what scares me. He's too honest for his own good." The air was hot and sticky. Tension pressed on every man like a wet blanket. The kind of silence before a strike. Then right movement. Phelps called down from his perch. "We've got company. North Ridge. One vehicle. 2 men on foot, flanking left and right." Ward's gut twisted. Too soon. He raised his rifle, stepping forward, eyes narrowing as the jeep rolled into view. It bore the U.S. star, clean and fresh, and sitting behind the wheel was a man in a lieutenant's uniform, too clean, too polished for the jungle. "Don't shoot," the officer called out, raising one hand while the other held a radio. "Lieutenant Mason, under orders from Major Wallace." "We're here to bring you home, Captain Ward." Ward didn't lower his weapon. "Funny, I didn't ask for a ride." Mason stepped forward slowly, flashing a tight, rehearsed smile. "You've been off-grid. Command's worried. We were told you'd gone rogue. Wallace wants to debrief you." Behind him, the 2 foot soldiers were inching toward cover. Ramirez whispered from behind his log, "Permission to light him up?" "Not yet," Ward said, loud enough for Mason to hear. "If you're here on Wallace's orders, you know what I found." Mason's smile faded. "All I know is you're in possession of classified documents that don't belong to you. Stand down, Captain." "You're out of line." Ward stepped closer. "You want me to believe this is a rescue? Where's your extraction bird? Why didn't Wallace send a full patrol?" Mason paused. "We didn't want to make a scene." "Or," Ward said, voice sharp now, "you didn't want survivors." Mason's eyes flicked, just a twitch. But it was enough. Ward raised his rifle. "Last chance. Leave now. You don't want what's coming." Mason didn't move. He looked over his shoulder, signaling his men. Too late. Boom! The claymore mine roared, ripping through the flanking soldier. Screams followed. Ramirez's machine gun opened up, chewing into the jeep's hood. Knox fired from behind the trees, catching the second soldier in the side before he could even lift his rifle. Mason dove behind the jeep, firing wildly. Ward moved fast, a blur between trees, flanking the officer from the left. Mason barely turned before Ward tackled him, slamming him into the dirt. They rolled through mud and roots, fists landing hard. Mason was younger, faster, but Ward was fighting for truth, for his men, and for every soldier Wallace had betrayed. He pinned Mason down, knuckles bloodied, and snarled. "How much did they pay you?" Mason spat blood. "It's not about money. It's control. Wallace is the future. You're just a relic." Ward didn't reply. He struck Mason once more, hard enough to end the fight. The lieutenant went limp, unconscious. "Captain!" Phelps shouted from above. "2 choppers incoming! One from the west, one from the south." Ward wiped the blood from his hands. "West is Tracker. South is Wallace." Carter looked at him. "How do you know?" "Because the southern one's early. They moved quickly. Ramirez and Knox rigged the crates with explosives, not to destroy, but to make them untouchable. Ward had already made copies of the most damning documents. tucked into waterproof tubes, strapped to his chest, and 2 others. "If they land shooting," Ward said, "we scatter. Tracker's bird is priority. No matter what happens, those documents leave this jungle." The sound of rotor blades filled the sky, and Captain Ward stood in the clearing, staring down the trees, ready to fight one last war, not for land or medals or flags, but for the truth. The sound of the helicopters grew louder, echoing off the jungle canopy like rolling thunder. Trees trembled under the force of the approaching blades. Captain Ward stood still in the clearing, eyes narrowed toward the southern sky. The others crouched, weapons up, nerves stretched thin. Visual on the first chopper, Western bird. Low-altitude, single-tail rotor, no markings. "Looks civilian," Phelps called from his perch. "Tracker," Ward said quietly, relief flickering in his voice. Then Ramirez barked, "Second chopper incoming, south side, fast and loud." 2 door gunners, definitely military. Ward didn't move. He didn't blink. It was happening just like Tracker warned. "Stick to the plan," he ordered. "Protect the evidence. Do not engage unless they fire first." The Western chopper broke through the trees, kicking up dirt and leaves as it hovered over the far end of the clearing. The skids touched down quickly. A lean, bearded man jumped out wearing headphones and a dirty flight vest. His eyes scanned the clearing like a man who didn't trust anything or anyone. "Tracker," Ward called out. The man gave a nod. "You Ward?" "Yes. You've got 60 seconds to board. After that, this bird's a ghost." Ward motioned to Ramirez. "Load crate Alpha, just one. The rest stays booby-trapped." Tracker looked confused. "Just one? Enough to blow the story wide open," Ward replied. "The rest is insurance." Then the southern chopper roared into view. It came in hot, too fast for safety, banking hard as if it were chasing prey. The side doors opened mid-air, machine guns glinting in the sun. "Take cover," Ward shouted. Tracer rounds tore through the clearing. Bark exploded off trees. One bullet clipped the side of the bush plane, punching through the wing. Knox returned fire, hammering the chopper's nose with his M4. Ramirez pulled Phelps out of his sniper perch just before a tree branch shattered above him. The firefight had begun, and the jungle howled with gunfire. Ward dragged Mason, still unconscious, behind the plane and tossed him at Tracker's feet. "He goes with you." Tracker looked at the bloodied officer. "Wallace's boy?" "Yeah. Let command hear it from his own mouth." "Copy that. 30 seconds. Ward turned to his men. "You know what to do!" Ramirez, Knox, and Phelps peeled off in different directions, drawing fire, ducking and weaving through the trees. One by one, they lured the shooters away from the clearing. The goal wasn't to win. It was to distract, to buy just enough time. Ward sprinted to the crate, lifting it with Tracker's help, tossing it onto the floor of the helicopter. Just as he turned back, a bullet cracked past his head and tore through Carter's shoulder. The pilot dropped to his knees with a grunt, clutching the wound. "Get him in!" Ward shouted. They dragged Carter aboard, blood pouring from his arm. "Ward!" Tracker yelled. "We're leaving now!" But Ward shook his head. "No, if I get on that chopper, they'll hunt you like a dog." "I stay. You've got the proof." "No," Ward said. "You do. Now go." Tracker slammed the side door. The rotor spun up. As the chopper lifted off, Ward turned, fired 2 quick shots into the jungle, where a muzzle flash had appeared, then disappeared into the trees like a shadow. The chopper gained altitude, bullets chasing it from the ground. But it was too late. Ward had done it. The crate was airborne. The traitor was captured. And most importantly, the truth was no longer in the jungle. It was headed straight for the outside world. Back on the ground, Ward regrouped with his men. Ramirez limped out from behind a rock covered in dust. Knox had a graze on his cheek, but grinned like a madman. Phelps dropped to a knee, reloading. "You made it?" Ward asked. Ramirez coughed. "You think we'd let you have all the fun?" Ward exhaled. The chopper was gone. Tracker had what they needed. Wallace would soon be exposed. But none of them celebrated, because they knew this wasn't the end. This was just the first bullet in a war of silence and shadows. A war that wasn't about borders or bullets anymore, but betrayal, corruption, and power from the inside. And deep in the jungle, with their weapons lowered and eyes still scanning the trees, the rangers remained. Not soldiers, not ghosts, but witnesses to a truth no one wanted to hear, and warriors who refused to stay silent.